Hello everybody, Jacoby here from Ivano-Frankivsk.
We're not very courageous. We're kind of cowardly. Why? The fact of the matter is that these people have nooses around their necks. So it's awful and horrible what they're doing to other people, but they're also doing it to themselves. It's actually slow motion suicide, and we ought to try to stop them.
I think this is the longest I've ever gone. I've been a missionary in Ukraine for, I don't know, 12 years or something. And it's the longest I've ever gone without doing an update. It's been months now. And a lot of the reason, because I had all these ideas in my mind for how to do this awesome video update, showing where our humanitarian aid that we gave went. And we have a lot of camp footage now for the camp that we did. And I was going to edit all that together. We had a young man edit one video together for us, but he wasn't at the camp, so I kind of wanted to do another one. Right now, Lera's been taking for over a month now, I think, a driving test, or going to driving school to get her driver's license. Much higher percentage of people in Ukraine don't have driver's license, and basically she's just taking courses on that. So in case there was an emergency situation where I wasn't home, she'd be able to drive. And then just generally, it'd be good for her to finally have a driver's license. We didn't have a car in Ukraine for over 10 years. We bought a 2011 RAV4 I think it was about a year ago today, when we started hearing the rumors about Russia having soldiers on the border, and we thought we need to have a way to drive out of here. And we had some crypto investments that had done really well. So we decided to buy a used 10-year-old car, something our dogs could scratch up, or if it got stolen or in a wreck, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It's been very faithful. We haven't had any issues with it until actually yesterday. I told Lera we're due for maintenance on our mileage and time-wise. And then actually yesterday my power steering went out and all the engine lights came on. And I think there's an issue with the alternator or the battery, or the alternator fuse or the alternator belt. So we have an appointment. We actually were going to drive on Friday to Lviv to see the Avatar movie in IMAX 3D, because there's not an IMAX theater here in Ivano-Frankivsk. That's a 2-hour drive. So we were going to go to Lviv for one night for Lera's birthday and see the new Avatar. But now we don't know if we'll make it because our car. So for those of you that don't know, Ukraine's been having major power issues for the last over a month. Now, we have power probably anywhere, depending on the day, might be 30% of the day to 60 sometimes. But a lot of times the lights are off. And so thank God that I bought this. I bought like this, it's called a generator, and a solar, or you can actually power it by just plugging it into the outlet. But it's more just like a big battery power bank. So I bought one of those as like a backup device for energy at camp, and then we kept it for emergency. And I also have a gas generator, one that we donated to a church in central Ukraine, actually like central eastern Ukraine, a large church there that had tons of refugees coming through. We donated one to them. We kept one, and then we donated a generator to someone in Odessa, and then we kept one, like not generator but power bank, and then several like small pocket solar power banks we donated to people in Kharkiv, in Mykolaiv, and a couple went other places like Kiev and Odessa, I believe. What are we doing right now? Well, I am basically the camp that we just did was in late August. It was incredible. We had a bunch of people from different ministries we'd never worked with before come to help us with that. We had campers from 4 or 5 cities. Half of them were Christian, half of them weren't, and a lot of them were internally displaced and weren't even living with their parents. So some of them were kind of like orphans who were living with some kind of group of kids with caretakers. All had their own unique situations, but our goal was to bring them to camp in the mountains and give them just a very memorable experience that had a lot of Jesus in it, and something they would never forget. so they could get away from the worries of the war and just be in a peaceful place and hear the gospel. So we succeeded in that. The campers loved it. We had extremely positive responses. There were, a few things that we'll do better next time with team leaders and organization and things and planning, but overall it was pretty amazing. And so yeah, one thing I wanted to say was when we were raising money for the camp, we asked people, anyone who gave $200, that we would connect them with a Ukrainian pen pal who would write them. The thing that happened was, and on the surface, this was our first time trying this seemed like a great idea, and everyone we told thought it was a great idea. But then after camp, it was like, well, the Christian kids that we know here are already part of a day center with lots of activities and plenty of follow-up. So we wanted to connect those people with the non-Christian kids. But the thing is, the non-Christian kids, while some of them stayed in our Telegram group where we do daily readings from the Gospel of John, others just left it. We lost kind of touch with. We don't know how the local follow-up is going, so we're going to have a better system on that next year. But some of the kids, we wrote and said, who's interested in a pen pal? And out of all of them, only 2 said yes. And then we had one lady who wanted to, took that seriously, and she gave money and wanted to pen pal with kids. So we were trying to get one of them to give us their contact to get her the information. And the 2 that said they want to do it, then they just went quiet once it got serious. So we're really sorry. This was not something we did on purpose. We did our very best, and they can't force the kids to do it if they just don't want to do it. They're probably shy. Maybe they're busy with schoolwork. It could be different reasons. But, I think a lot of the people that gave money, they would rather just give the money because they have busy lives, they have families, they have ministry. And, having an extra pen pal would just require a little more time. Some people might be happy to do that, but so I just wanted to let you know that didn't work out. So next time we ask for money for camp, we won't do it that way. So after the camp, we had to go straight away to, loading everything up in the truck and then putting it in our garage storage unit. We had to drive to Odessa. It's like a 10-hour drive for Lera's brother's wedding. And I was so exhausted that for 3 or 4 days, I barely made it there driving for 10 hours awake. And then every time we would go to somebody's house or to the wedding or to the church, I would literally be sitting there just falling asleep because I was so exhausted from the camp. And then after that, we drove back to Frankivsk, and I had a tennis elbow issue for like 13 years, but I never did anything to, I never got any shots or treatment or anything. So I went into the doctor, and I got cortisone shots in my left elbow, and that was in a cast for 6 weeks. And then I had cortisone shots in my other arm, and that was in a cast for 6 weeks. And so when we first left Odessa after the full-scale invasion, we'd gone to Moldova and lived there for a couple months. Then we decided to move back to Ukraine, but further west to Frankivsk. But when we first came here, it was in a hurry, and we couldn't find a place to rent where they would allow dogs. And we have 2 dogs. But someone found us a sauna house just outside of the city in the forest. But it was nice because it was built of wood and it was in the forest, so that was cool. But it was very dirty and gross. There was spider webs everywhere. We had to wash these dusty curtains. There was no stove, so we had to buy like an electric stove so we could cook food. The fridge everything was disgusting. And we cleaned everything, and there was black grime on the floor that I scrubbed with scratchies to get off, and finally got situated where it was cozy there. We lived there for 2 months, but we could only stay there for a couple months in the summer. And then we found a flat for rent, this one we live in now, which was the only one we could find that would allow dogs. But the price was good. For the flat and for this huge garage underneath it, we're on the 2nd floor, It's like $400 a month, which was, well, our rent in Odessa without a storage unit was like $5.25, I think, give or take, depending on the dollar to hryvnia difference. Plus, then we started renting a storage unit because we bought a trailer so we could move our stuff out of there in case of emergency. That's another story. But anyway, so for the storage unit was another, I think it was $50 a month. So $575. It was a little bigger flat, but anyway. So this is a good deal here, but the walls, they were completely dirty and gross, and the colors were ugly. So we brought in, we hired like, I don't know, 6 kids from the church we're going to here to come help us for a week, clean this place up and paint it. And then after that, I had to do a bunch of finish, touch-up work and finish the painting. But it was just basically move in here, like come here, spend 1 week painting while I'm trying to prepare for the camp, and then move everything here and into the garage, and then go to the camp, do the camp, and then after the camp, just throw everything into the garage, unorganized. None of my shelves are set up. So it's just this huge pile of all this stuff. So how did I get all this camping equipment? Well, we already had a little bit, because we'd done some camps in the past, but basically we were getting all these donations for humanitarian aid. Some of that went straight to humanitarian aid. Some of that went to emergency supplies for ourselves, like we have 30-day emergency food supplies, bulletproof vests for ourselves. We have, the power bank. But the majority of the stuff was, well, I'd say maybe half was just sent out, donated, and then we bought a lot of camping equipment because there were so many internally displaced refugees leaving eastern Ukraine that I thought, my good friend and business partner, we have a small piece of land in the Carpathian Mountains where we're building a cabin for like a glamping rental, and he has a bigger piece of land of his own. And at the time, my crypto was worth a lot more, and I wanted to buy a big piece of land and then put some shipping containers there for storage and some tents and bring refugees there that wanted to work and build like dormitory living facilities for refugees with common areas in the mountains, and then use that later as ministry camp. That was my idea. But, so I started buying all this camping equipment and tools for that. So half of our donation money and then a large of my own money was going towards that. That was the idea. And I had mailed it to friends in the States, but he started having issues where his business, where he wasn't able to fly it over. And so rather than waiting for that or finding someone else to fly it over, I realized, rather than trusting somebody with packing all that, organizing all the logistics and flying it over and going back, I have a lot of experience with this. I can just fly there, see a few people real quick because I hadn't been in the States in over 5 years, grab all the stuff and come back. So that's what I did, and we wound up with all this like 6, 9 or 10-man tents and a bunch of other generators and camping equipment. Lanterns and a bunch of first aid stuff and all this. So we thought, but by the time I got back to Ukraine, the flow of refugees, they were moving by and large out of Ukraine. So they would come to the cities in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, and then they would just move on out of Ukraine. So the just number of refugees here or internally displaced just got thinner and thinner and thinner. So I realized, well, this isn't, and I went up and I saw that land, and within that first 2 months of the full-scale invasion, crypto went boom. And then I had, like sometimes I just tell people what I had in crypto, and I don't tell that to make people feel weird or awkward about money, or to say like, look at me, because I made tons of mistakes with crypto. I started, in crypto in late 2017. But I ended up studying it a lot. I wrote a book about it, which I haven't published yet. But anyways, at one point on paper, there was one day we're at $850,000. later on, and then I started diversifying that into mid caps, micro caps, and some selection of majors. So I was diversified well across the board. I was doing a lot of yield farming, and then I got into NFTs. But anyways, I wound up donating like half my crypto to our MIA nonprofit ministry, and then like half in each account went into various cryptos and then NFTs. So I ended up with like having like, I don't know, before the full-scale invasion, I had like $250,000 in crypto, which I could have cashed out, and then another $250,000 spread out in NFTs, half in my own personal and half in MIA. And these were all like considered long-term investments. But I'd also taken profits out. That's how we bought our car. That's how we had started fixing up our flat in Odessa. A lot of that money went towards the humanitarian aid money, was some of my own. That's how we were able to have money to move out here, all of our stuff, you know, yada, yada, yada. So, and a lot of the profits, I said, I was actually looking into putting like 20% in gold, but I went to a friend who sold gold, and I realized this is like a, I don't know, what do they call it, multi-level marketing scheme, and an MLM scheme. So I didn't touch that because I guess like you can't legally just buy gold bullion in Ukraine. You have to buy the jewelry or whatever. And so I had actually put, and this guy was thinking I wanted to invest like $5,000 when I really want to invest like 100 or 200 grand in gold. And I actually wrote a couple of people in the States who were going to help me with this, but they just didn't respond. And so it just didn't happen. And so I wished I'd put that in gold. But I also started putting, every month I'd put like $1,000 into Star Wars toys that I kept in boxes, and I packed them all away. And so this was like, because I don't trust what the dollar's going to do. I think the dollar's being intentionally sabotaged. And so I have saving. I invested some, and I got my setup for my video work. So I did take profits out along the way, just small profits, but they should have been much larger chunks. Anyhow, so during the first 2 months after the full-scale invasion started, my $250,000 in crypto went down to like 20, and I had like 30 grand in Dogecoin on a 1.5 leverage trade on FTX of all places. It's the only money I had on FTX. Because I was so consumed with humanitarian aid and what was happening in Ukraine, I was no longer managing my crypto. I didn't have a stop loss. I didn't get out. Completely stupid. Normally, I'd have a stop loss. I would have at least got out with a few grand left, you know, instead of losing the whole 30 grand position or whatever it was, or 20, can't remember. Then I had 30 grand in Luna, which I was yield farming with. Everybody thought Luna was the greatest thing ever. And there was actually a day when I saw a thumbnail for a video explaining what the potential problems with Luna were, and it crossed my mind to watch it. But in that season of my life, I just shut off crypto completely. I wasn't monitoring it because I was too consumed with, I mean, the first 3 months of the war, I watched one movie because it was just constantly had something to do, somebody to help, or trying to get, you know, raise money or get humanitarian aid somewhere, or check the news to be updated on what's going on. So, you know, we were very discombobulated, praying a lot. So when the crypto crashed and Luna crashed and Doge crashed, we just let it, and that money went poof, gone. You know, like in one day, 60, like 100 grand gone. You know, 60 Luna go to zero, then Doge gets my long position on leverage gets liquidated. I had 1.5x leverage. And then other coins just, you know, went way down. So that money's not gone, but basically it went from having $250,000 to having like 30 grand or something like that. And so that position's still holding. And then I had some NFTs where every month, last few months, I've been able to sell one or two. You know, if you want a whole history on my NFTs, I had one NFT I won in a raffle that I sold for 60 grand This was back before the war. But sometimes here and there I have some from Wilder World I've been able to sell for $1 or $2 a piece in the last 4 or 5 months or something when we needed a little extra money. And so after getting record donations during the first few months of the war, and then it seemed like people kind of got burnt out with giving, or people wanted to give. Maybe a lot of these larger humanitarian organizations have a lot of money. A lot of it primarily comes from leftists, ironically, or I think people just saw like what they thought was corruption in Ukraine, or they got disenfranchised with the whole idea of the government sending so much money to Ukraine and not knowing where that's going, or believing it was being money laundered back to Democrats. So like, I don't want to give money to Ukraine, but it's like that. This is a better, safer way. And I really don't care if you give to us or to another Christian here. I don't. If that money you want it to go to humanitarian aid, it doesn't matter if you send it to me or them. That's what I'm going to use it for. One guy made a comment when I was in the States that I told him the money that was sent for humanitarian aid was already spent. And he said, what? People gave that much money and it's just burned a hole in your pocket? But it was like, well, first of all, buddy, that's what they gave it for, so that's what I used it for, because I try to be faithful with what people give it for. And then, secondly, a lot of that wasn't blown because it was put in emergency products that we actually need right now because our power is off 60-70% of the day. So a lot of that was well spent, and then the camp supplies something we'll use for years and years to come. So then I was able, by God's grace, to raise money for the camp. And this camping equipment is stuff we're going to use year or after year after year after year. So I think it was a wise investment. I can't say like every penny I would have spent perfectly how God would have spent it, but I believe we stewarded it well, and you know, given we're fallen imperfect human beings, we did the best we could with it. And so that's that, yeah. So basically, I haven't, after camp, wanted to ask for money. My wife is, you know, when I had all that money that I made in crypto, I was like, whew, I don't have to raise support anymore, because, you know, support can become a full-time job in itself, trying to keep everybody updated, you know, plus do ministry, and then just live your normal family life and do all of your errands, plus have time to relax, because, you know, resting well is part of working well. So it all becomes a lot, and I just really don't like raising support. But I believe that if what you're doing is God's work, that it's actually my Christian duty with confidence, boldness, and faith to ask for money, because it would be wrong for me to not ask if it's being used for the sake of the kingdom. So I just always felt like I'm supposed to. And people who think you're not supposed to, I just believe that they understand what the scripture teaches about that wrong, or just somewhere got this wrong attitude about it that makes people feel good, but it's not really biblical, or it's not really right. So it's just about what people think feels right, like don't pressure me, or don't, you know, if you're feeling obligated, then your heart's just not in the right place, not because somebody asked. If you don't want it, then don't. But that's just not in your own best interest. Anyway, I've written on this before. I had one really good friend. He was my friend for years, and we did a lot of street evangelization together, and then I became a missionary. And then it was like, I visited the States after being here for a few years, and I remember his wife saying, well, we just didn't know what you're doing there. But every month I was faithful to send updates, and I never just came to Ukraine and was like, oh, I'm on a vacation now. I'm raising money so I can chill here. And I was always like going the extra mile to work, to do something. And I actually, like, this burden, this stress, actually I feel like was always hanging on me. So when I didn't have to have this pressure anymore to raise money. I was like, phew, I can support myself. I can start a businesses or something, and you know, that fuel the ministry. So, but this guy, he met with my sister for coffee, and was basically just talking about me behind my back, how he doesn't like me anymore because I asked for money. And it's like, this is just so bizarre to me, because it was somebody who was like one of your best friends. And like you said, and I guess like if I try to understand it, my guess is they're just projecting onto me what they would do in my situation. They wouldn't ask, and they would think, oh, I should work and support myself. And I had a friend tell me once, you should do ministry less and work more, because my job is to provide for my family. But the whole point was to be free to not work, so I could have free time to do ministry. And I'm asking you to support, because some of the body of Christ should work and support missions and their local church, and others should be free to do ministry full time. And other people have different views on whether they should give money to parachurch ministry or whatever. I won't go into that, but I have my own views on that, especially being a missionary on the field here and experiencing the need for parachurch ministry. But anyhow, so what I was saying was, I didn't want to be asking, because I just think people were tired of giving money to Ukraine, and we raised money for camp, and I wanted to save that for next camp. And I'm not saying that I'm asking for money now, but Lera has been continuing all year to work for a large humanitarian aid organization, and they've made an exception for her, because they tried a couple times to get her to move to where they have an office, and she just said, no, sorry, we're not going to do that. But they allowed her to work remotely, which they don't do for people, but she's been doing it. And they said October would be her last month, but then they extended it to December. So it's ending this month. We've been able to get by. You know, we don't want to touch our crypto investment. We want to let it sit there until it goes back up. I project another 2 years before something like that happens. Could be completely wrong, but I believe another 2 years we're looking at holding. And then we have our cabin project that I mentioned, where we have the piece of land. That's the exterior is built, and now we're working on the interior, and then we got to furnish it. So by next spring, we'll be able to rent that out and be getting money every month for that. And then on this property, we're going to build a few more of those in the years to come. So that will help. But anyways, if God puts it on your heart, because Lera, what she gets paid there, $1,000 a month, plus on top of what we usually get with ministry support, which is like a little less than $2,000. I don't actually know what it is exactly right now, but she won't be making that anymore. So if you feel led to give, then we really greatly appreciate that. And so thank you. So I think I talked about that. I'll talk a little bit about what our plan is right now. Basically, I was going to go to the States in the spring and found an LLC and start crowdfunding investors to buy a piece of land in Carpathia, because before the full-scale invasion, I had this money where I was going to start. I had 6 small business ideas, and I had one young man in his mid-20s who had a law degree and management experience with the company, who was going to manage all of them. I was going to pay him a monthly base pay plus incentives, percentage of the profits of all these small businesses. We were going to get 1 started, then 2, up to 6, and then see how they go over the next 6 months. And the ones that were most promising, we'd focus more on those. So I was ready to get these businesses started, and then I wanted to start the rec center ministry in Odessa eventually, and then a Carpathian camp ministry. So I already had this idea to buy land in Carpathia with my own money, or money I donated to MIA. But now, like I said, we're waiting on that. So I think I've been able to show what I can do, what I can organize, what the potential is. And so I thought, well, we'll just get crowdfund investors that want to invest in a business where they can make monthly payouts, receive monthly payouts, And on the same time, that business will support the work of our ministry here in Ukraine. So I also have this long-term vision where I want to go complete seminary and do theology teaching, but and I'm also to fuel kids into our camps. I have a bunch of baseball equipment. I'll get a little bit more. I have a bunch of bats. I have a good amount of balls, but I need a bunch more balls and I need more mitts. So, but we'll get that later. If you have any used baseball equipment you want to donate, that'd be great. But I want to start a baseball league in Ivano-Frankivsk and surrounding villages, teach kids to play baseball and start a league. And this way, through this ministry and then the day center that Lera's helping with, because there's a great day center ministry here with our church in Ivano-Frankivsk that Lera's helping teach English at, and she's probably going to start doing a little more there. Through these different ministries, we will funnel kids into our summer camps in the mountains. But I think I'm going to put that on hold for 1 year to see what crypto does, to see what happens with the war in Ukraine. And I'm going to spend a whole year just with my, what's the expression? I want to say my face to the grindstone, but that sounds pretty painful. But just basically buckle down and study Ukrainian. I can do so much more to open a whole new world to me if I can just really learn the Ukrainian language. The pastor at the church we go to asked me last 3 weeks ago I preached, and he asked me if I want to preach a series on the Ten Commandments, so I might do a series on the law. But I basically want to do nothing for a year, maybe even more, but focus on learning Ukrainian. And then a side project I'm working on writing a sci-fi fantasy thing. So that, along with therapy for my arms, exercising to try to be healthy, my own spiritual time in the Word, preparing these sermon messages, growing in my theological knowledge, and most of my time, my priority when I wake up in the morning, I want to spend 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours a day studying Ukrainian. Now that we finally got our flat situated, it's kind of hard when the lights go out, when you're sitting in your house with flashlights and lanterns and the sun's not up so much because it's winter. But basically, you know what our future plans are: camp in the mountains, potentially a baseball league, Lera teaching English, being involved in the day center, and then I want to do this big theology online video hub. That's more of a long-term plan. So I plan to go to seminary in the future for that, but that's a couple of years out, I imagine, before I even start. And, even if things change along the way, at least we're in motion, we're going forward, and we have goals, and God guides moving objects. So also, Lera will probably continue her biblical counseling degree. So, and when I preach, Lera translates for me, so that helps her because Russian was always her main language in Ukraine, but now it's Ukrainian, and it's a little bit harder for her to translate in Ukrainian. Her Ukrainian is good, but it stretches her. So this helps her grow in that. And because of everyone's ministry support here, I've been able to, do many outreaches, did an English club ministry for years. I forgot to mention, there's a nearby village whose church is in the denomination of the church we go to here, and we're going to go there once a month and do an English club for the kids in that village. So there's the monthly English club. I'll probably do like a monthly preaching, and then learning Ukrainian and working on my fantasy sci-fi side project, plus therapy with my elbows and arms, and helping, one more thing, the church is getting a new building that they're purchasing, and I want to be there helping them with renovation and stuff like that. So my garage never got organized. It's still a big pile, and I will, it's cold down there, so I'm just letting that pile sit there until the spring, and then I'll go down there and finish organizing all of that. Okay, we had a little break and Luna decided to join us. So whenever I wipe her eyes, she needs to lick my fingers clean. Okay, so prayer requests. Well, sometimes people say, please give us an update on how you're doing so we know how to pray for you. But I always wonder, like the same things people always need prayer for. We always need prayer for God's protection, for growth in grace, for fruitful ministry, for the gospel to go forth. Like you can pray those things 1,000,000 times and you can't go wrong. So that's what we need prayer for, that God sanctifies our hearts, helps us to love God and to love people, to just grow in ministry, to bless the ministry, to make it fruitful, to guide us, to protect us, to keep us safe. And as far as other particulars, sometimes there are specific things that can be exceptions. And I would say if it's God's will that He give us a child, we're open to adoption, but the adoption agency in Ukraine is very expensive and very corrupt. But we are ready if we come across, we basically believe, like it happened with my wife, like it happened with my ministry calling, it was just unquestionable, and in the right time we knew. So it's not something we're just like forcing, but we're ready and available and willing. If we see this opportunity to adopt the right person in the right time, we will. And or that God would just give us our own biological child to raise. We would love to have a little Padawan or a Bambinette, one of the two. And pray for this war to end. Pray for America, because it's a cultural and political and economic mess. So those would be my main prayer requests, for a child, for me to learn Ukrainian. Languages are not my gift. Theology is my gift. Creative things like writing and other stuff I like to do, but it takes a real discipline for language learning. So I need prayer for that. If Lera's going to get her driver's license soon, you can pray for her safety on the road. I'll pray for our car, that this alternator issue or whatever it is isn't something too serious. And then you could pray about joining us, the ministry here. If you want to come here on a short-term trip or be involved in our next camp, we're giving money towards that. So thank you very much for listening.